So I want to talk to you about leadership. And I'm sure just by saying that word, some of you have instantly started thinking about chain of command, systems, hierarchies, administration, and even a commanding presence. If that's the case, I want you to pause and spend some time with me reconsidering what leadership, not as a position, might look like and what that might change. So for almost my entire professional career, I've worked in higher education. For those of you who aren't aware, higher education has a lot of processes, policies, and administration. When I started in my career being a type A personality, rule follower to my core, I was going to do the best job I could, which I thought meant staying in my lane and doing exactly what I was supposed to do. The only problem was, when trying to support student success, I would see issues arising that were outside of my lane. And the only course of action I saw was to go to the leader or the person in a position of authority, tell them the problem, and let them fix it. That didn't really work. So I was left frustrated, disappointed, feeling like I was failing the students I was working with. Now, going out and trying to fix this, I continued to do what I could to learn about leadership. I studied all the theories, I went to all the trainings, but what I kept coming up against was, in order for me to affect change, I was going to have to be at the highest position in order to make anything happen. And then 5 years ago, I started working at a university in Kansas, and it was there that I was exposed to adaptive leadership. And suddenly, leadership shifted. It was no longer about a position, but an action. Leadership not as a noun, but as a verb, which is completely against what our society in this Western culture has conditioned us to think. But yet, when I started applying that practice, that action of leadership, I saw change. I saw it making a difference, and I started investing more of myself to learn about it, to go out and teach others. I even spent my entire dissertation research going on to see how adaptive leadership empowers women specifically. But before I go on my soapbox declaration of love for adaptive leadership, you're probably wondering, what exactly is this? So adaptive leadership was brought by Ronald Heifetz and Marty Linsky in 1994. And they suggested this idea that leadership in action brings people together to tackle adaptive challenges. More so, the definition that the Kansas Leadership Center brought to my attention was the action of mobilizing a group of individuals to take on adaptive challenges and make change for the common good. And so through this, it requires people to work together. That's group work. And it also is adaptive, which means that there's not a set list of instructions to guarantee perfect results. Instead, there's behaviors and traits and skills that you can utilize to increase your likelihood of success. And finally, I'm not going to sugarcoat this for you. It can feel risky to practice adaptive leadership because this is flying in the face of leadership theories that prevail today. It requires you to do something different, and different can feel dangerous, but it's not actually dangerous. And if what you're about to go do is dangerous, that's probably not adaptive leadership. Okay. I've probably lost many of you already, though, because what I just suggested you try requires group work, doesn't have a set checklist that you can complete, and it's risky. But here's the thing. I don't think we have as much of a choice about whether or not to use adaptive leadership. I think that we have to utilize the skills of adaptive leadership in order to make change, because the challenges we're up against today in the world are adaptive. So there's a difference in the types of challenges that we face. There are technical challenges. This would be breaking your foot. You go to the doctor, the authority, they diagnose this, they tell you exactly what to do. You know in 6 to 8 weeks after being in a cast, you're going to be fine. End goal and a set amount of time. However, not many of us get the luxury of just working with broken bones. Our day-to-day lives are abounding in adaptive challenges. One example of an adaptive challenge that I am very well accustomed with is the rise of mental health issues for college students. In fact, Boston University did a recent survey of college students and found that from 2013 to 2021, there was a 135% increase in depression and a 113% increase in anxiety. So we know that there's a problem. We know that students in college are more stressed, depressed, and anxious than ever before. However, we don't know exactly what's causing it. And in order to try and make some changes to improve the outcome for these students, it's going to take curiosity. It's going to be asking a lot of questions. It's going to require us to get more people involved. Those stakeholders, the mental health professionals, the educators, the administrators, and even the students themselves to come together to try and do some things a little bit differently in order to see if we can make a change. So, with all of this, though, are the competencies. Now, Heifetz and Linsky first brought together the idea of adaptive leadership. They outlined 6 ideas, but I myself prefer the Kansas Leadership Center's approach because they boiled it down to 4 competencies, and that was a shorter list to remember. Something I want to point out, though, is while I'm listing these in a numerical order, they're not actually done in a linear fashion. Every one of these you're doing in concert with one another. When it comes to diagnosing a situation, this is where you try to get a lay of the land. Try to start asking the questions of what's going on here. Talk to people, find out what's happening, and who really should be involved in this challenge. When we're getting to energizing others, this is where you start actually pulling the people in who need to be involved. And you have to do this in a trustworthy manner. It's not enough just to offer lip service, come show up, tell me what you think, but I'm going to do my own thing anyways. You have to be willing to acknowledge a loss as well, because anybody who's willing to come in and work together is losing something, whether that be their time or their control, or even that they may have to give up the way that they've been doing things before. With intervening skillfully, this is where the work continues, and it's being given back out. No Lone Rangers are really going to make a difference here. This is also where leaders in action have to go up to the balcony, look at what's happening to make sure the steps that are being taken are in concert with what the goal is. Now, finally, manage self. While all of these other points were highly community-driven and relationship-based, the reality is if you as an individual are not managing yourself, your strengths and your vulnerabilities, if you're not making sure that you're preventing your own burnout, then you're not going to be helpful in progressing on these challenges. So there you have it. But I'm sure that with all of this that I've explained now, you're still wondering, so what? How do I know it's really going to work? Because if you're going to invest in something, you want to know there's a return on that. So I'm going to leave you with a little bit of an explanation of how I recently have been using adaptive leadership. When I started at Missouri&T about a year ago, I was brought in as the director of Commerce Student Programs. And one of my initiatives was to design and facilitate a 4-year scholarship program for undergraduate students. Now, these undergraduate students, which numbered 450 in the first class, started their program in August of 2021. Well, I didn't start my role until November of that same year. So when I came in, there was a challenge. This program was a little confusing. No one was quite sure what its purpose was or where it was going to go. So I started by trying to diagnose the situation. I asked students, what was your experience like so far? I made sure to talk to the faculty who had got this program up and going. What has worked well, and where do you see opportunities? When it came to energizing others, this is where I had to continue engaging those students, to let them feel comfortable enough to tell me what they didn't like about things and know that I was going to do what I could to make it better for them, as well as making sure that the faculty knew how incredibly important they were for this process and to continue building and nurturing that relationship. When it came to intervening skillfully, this is where, again, the work continued. The reality is, when this program is at steady state, there will be over 2,000 students that I and my assistant director will be helping to facilitate through their success at S&T. And we cannot do that alone. So we've been strategic in the way that we've been trying to build relationships across campus, reaching out, collaborating, and trying to give the work back for other people who buy in to what we're trying to achieve. And finally, with Manage Self, I had to be comfortable walking into a room and not having all the answers, which for a type A personality is a little difficult. I also had to recognize that I couldn't do it all. And I had to try and pace myself, which I remind myself of as much as I can. Now, saying all of this, and you can see the way that I've applied adaptive leadership, it's also not done. And I'm not going to stand here and tell you that this is perfect. And the students in the audience here today who are part of my program would probably agree with that. But it's a continuous process. We're improving as we go. And I know that we're getting somewhere because our first-year retention rate showed significant advantages for students in my program, and they also were holding higher GPAs on average than students who were not in the Vanguard Scholars Program. So, with all of that being said, I'm encouraging you to do something different, to take on leadership as an activity, however that might look for you. Maybe the next time you go into a meeting, that means not trying to have all the answers and instead inviting others into the conversation. That might help you create a more holistic solution, something that's actually going to be more sustainable. And in turn, I think that is a chain reaction, and it's going to make a difference. And that's why I believe that adaptive leadership, the activity of leadership, is really what will change the world. Thank you.